everyone, good evening. My name is Cassandra Cavness. I am the Development Assistant at the Montgomery Museum of Fine Arts. Although we cannot welcome you through our doors yet, we are excited to connect with you in this new way through these online conversations. Tonight's conversation is part 2 of our creative conversations for the exhibition Personal to Political, celebrating the African-American artists of Paulson Fontaine Press. Tonight, we have the honor and the pleasure of having 2 of the featured artists with us, Lava Thomas and Radcliffe Bailey. And we're going to learn a little bit about what inspires them and talk a little bit about the current national turmoil and how that affects their art and the artistic community. And so I'm just so glad that you guys are able to join me here tonight for what is sure to be an intriguing and thought-provoking conversation. So before we start, I want to give you a little bit of a background on the exhibition. It features 14 artists whose work creates powerful messages and encourages the viewers to reflect on race and race relations throughout the fabric of our society. The works shed light on the systemic racism in our country that allows for conditions of extreme violence, conditions that have led to the deaths of George Floyd, Rashad Brooks, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and so many, many others. The artists of Personal to Political capture the many personal narratives and political battles of African-American artists across the country, reflecting a collective experience expressed in uniquely individual ways. The works range from figurative to artistic and speak to the larger humanistic experience from past to present and honors the stories and wisdom of African-American artists that Paulson Fontaine Press has cherished for decades. The exhibition was organized by the Bedford Gallery Lesher Center for the Arts in Walnut Creek, California. And the representation at the MMFA is sponsored by the Alabama State Council of the Arts, with additional support provided by the co-sponsor, Resonant Bank. Through this conversation, I hope that we can create an understanding of how the arts can help you to express yourself, to tell unvarnished truths, and to help us heal as a society from our self-inflicted wounds. To help us in this journey, as I've already mentioned, we have 2 amazing artists with us tonight, Lava Thomas and Radcliffe Bailey. Lava was born in Los Angeles and currently lives and works in Berkeley, California. She has a BFA from California College of Arts and is a multidisciplinary artist. Her work has been featured in institutions across the country, from the California African American Museum in Los Angeles, to the Krasl Art Center in St. Joseph, Michigan, to the National Portrait Gallery in Washington, D.C. Thomas tackles issues of race, gender, representation, and memorialization, and draws from her family's Southern roots, current socio-political events, intersectional feminism, and African-American protests and devotional traditions when creating. Thomas's practice centers ideas that amplify visibility, healing, and empowerment in the face of erasure, trauma, and oppression. Lava?
Hi, everyone. I'm really happy to be here. And thank you so much, Cassandra, for the invitation.
Well, thank you so much for being here. So Radcliffe was born in Bridgetown, New Jersey, but he grew up in the South and he now lives and works in Atlanta, Georgia. He holds a Bachelor's of Fine Arts from Atlanta College of Art. He's a painter, a sculptor, and a mixed media artist who uses personal mementos in his work, which explores themes of race, migration, and collective memory. Bailey's art has been featured in exhibitions in a multitude of museums, from the High Museum in Atlanta to the Southeastern Center for Contemporary Art in Winston-Salem, to the Jack Shainman Gallery in New York City. His work speaks to the past, the present, and the future, while simultaneously focusing on the element of healing. Radcliffe?
Hey, how are you doing, Cassandra?
So, okay, guys, let's talk a little bit about this exhibition. As I mentioned before, there's 14 artists. There's Edgar Arsenault, Radcliffe Bailey, MacArthur Binion, Lonnie Holly, David Huffman, Samuel Levi Jones, Kerry James Marshall, Martin Puryear, Gary Simons, Lava Thomas, and 4 G's Bend Quilters, Susanna Bendolph, Mary Lee Bendolph, Loretta Bennett, and Loretta Petway. What I love about this exhibition is how dynamic it is. From every piece that your eye goes to, there's always something there. There's something more to engage with. There's something more to look at. Nothing in this exhibition is static. The way in which the pieces jump out and captivate you, it's just amazing. And you know, the way that the pieces also deal with racial violence and the legacies of slavery and segregation are encapsulated in a sort of beauty that allows us to see past the trauma. So can you each talk a little bit about how you came to be involved with this exhibition and why you felt that it was important for your work to be a part of it?
You, Lava, you got.
Who wants to jump in? You ready, Radcliffe?
Ready, but you first. Ladies
Okay. I participated in a project with Paulson back in the mid 2000s, I believe. And at the time that I did the project, I didn't know then that it would turn into a larger exhibition of works by African-American artists. So when I was told later that there would be this exhibition, I was really excited. Foremost because the other artists in the exhibition, I really respect. I have so much admiration for so many of the folks that are represented, and the fact that it started at Lesher Gallery in Walnut Creek was really a way to highlight the work of African-American artists in a place where there aren't many of us. And I was really thrilled to learn also that the exhibition would travel. So it's really an honor to be in the company of artists that I admire and respect who are doing important work. And now to be at the Montgomery Fine Arts Museum.
Thank you, Lava. Radcliffe?
Yeah, I've been with probably since close around the same time, since like 97. And for me, was working with the press, traveling from Atlanta to Oakland, and being able to work with the press, just always a beautiful thing. I've always been a fan of that work with the press. Some I know, I don't, I know work. And so it's been a beautiful work on a press. And when I started working with the press, literally first time I really started print. So that was a wonderful experience. Always informed my work to this day. Because I was being very cool, and to be able to print text.
Right.
It's been beautiful, beautiful experience. But yeah.
Well, thank you both for giving us a little insight on that. So we're going to dive a little deeper and talk about the work that is currently hanging in our galleries. So Lava, the first one is this fictitious self-portrait. And what I love about this, well, first of all, okay, when I saw it, I thought you had drawn my sister's hair. Because that's what my sister's hair looks like from the back. And so I was like, whoa, what is that? But no, I love this piece, and I love your hair series, your portraits. They're just so stunningly rendered. And, you know, you're doing it in the style of 17th century scientific illustrations for medical studies. So can you talk a little bit about why you chose to do it in that style?
I chose to do it in the style of scientific illustrations because that style is very exacting, and it presents a kind of truth, right? If you're looking at a scientific illustration, you assume that there's rigor in research that is, and that it is explanatory. That's the main purpose for scientific illustration. My way of drawing is technically precise and very exacting as well. So following that style fit really well with the way that I go about drawings, and in this case, etchings. And creating the etchings was the first time that I actually approached this body of work through printmaking. And so it was a learning curve, because you're actually etching into a copper plate and you don't really see the image well until it's been inked and the ink has been rubbed off. So with this series of portraiture, I was really thinking about an alternative approach to portraiture, a way to present portraiture or create portraits without really presenting a likeness. And I was thinking of how our hair contains our DNA, but also a record of where we've lived, what we eat, the medication or drugs that we've ingested. So there's that science behind it as well. And it also, that also resonates with the scientific illustrations. With this project, there was also a transaction. I asked people to give me locks of their cut hair in order to draw them. I also think about this series of really, and our hair is an expression of our identity, a way that we identify sometimes with a particular group. It's the easiest part of ourselves to change. And at that moment of cutting it, sometimes it's even an act of transformation. You think about somebody cutting their hair when they're getting ready to go on a job interview after college, or a woman who cuts her hair after she gives birth so that her hair is easier to manage. So I was also interested in that moment of transformation as well when a person cuts their hair.
You know, that's kind of where I went with it too, you know, how a person's hair is often tied to their self-image. And, you know, what does it mean when you're cut off from that self-image, and how does that affect the person, and how does the world receive you differently? You know, that's kind of what I got from this piece as well. It's very powerful.
Thank you. Thank you. I think of that moment of transformation really as a moment of possibility. No, you are, and many times you are creating a new image. You're presenting yourself in a new way. You're creating, as much as you can, a kind of new identity for yourself.
You know, and that kind of rolls right into the next image that we have here, a piece which you've titled "A Change is Gonna Come, Oh Yes It Will." First of all, I love this piece, and I love Sam Cooke, and I love the song. And and you know, what I love about this piece is the fact that you've chosen a musical instrument, but yet it's not being played. It's you know, stuck against the wall, but yet there's still a movement to this piece. You know, I can imagine, you know, somebody standing behind Sam and hitting, you know, the tambourine.
Right.
It sounds that like that soft staccato in the back of that song. And so it's that rhythm and that movement of this piece. And I think you capture that brilliantly with this piece. But there's a lyric from the song, and it says, forgive me, I need to read it to get it right. It's been too hard living, but I'm afraid to die, because I don't know what's up there beyond the sky. It's been a long, long time coming, but I know a change gonna come. Oh, yes, it will. And I feel like that is so relevant to this piece, but also really relevant to what's going on in the world today.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I created this piece as part of a larger body of work that looks at the foundational events of the civil rights movement, but also the sustaining practices of the civil rights movement. And in this case, looking at the African-American music traditions, gospel music, R&B, spirituals that were a source of both motivation and inspiration during the civil rights movement. This piece, as well as the body of work larger body of work that it belongs to, is just as relevant today as it was when A Change Is Going to Come was written in 1963, 64. I started thinking about the civil rights movement actually during the 2016 presidential campaign, with the racist rhetoric coming out of that campaign, the misogynist rhetoric coming out of that campaign. And honestly, here we are, 4 years later, and who would have imagined the racial hatred that this president has stirred up, and the recurrence and the resurgence of hate crimes, lethal violence, all of the conditions that we were fighting against during the civil rights movement are still topical and still a problem today. We're still fighting.
Yeah, we really are. And, I think what is also great about this piece is that there's no one tambourine. Like, it's all a unit. It all has to work together to get the image.
Yeah.
And, what it reminds me of is Martin Luther King Jr.'s hope that we could all be a drum major of peace. And, I feel like if you heard somebody just bang on a tambourine in a very rhythmic way, we would become that drum major of peace. And so I feel that essence kind of flowing from this piece. And I love it.
Thank you.
Okay. So Radcliffe, we're going to switch over to you and some of your pieces that are in the show. So this one, Between Two Worlds, I love the contrast between the elegance of the woman in the photograph and the way in which the rest of the image is created and rendered. To me, it feels like the entire piece is stuck between two worlds, like the woman herself. She's trying to fit in to white America, but yet she has her heritage with her, where she truly belongs and where people accept her. And can you talk a little bit about that contrast and how that idea of between two worlds kind of influenced this piece?
Okay, I'll probably talk around your question.
That's okay.
Well, number one, right before I was graduating from art school, my grandmother gave me about 400 photographs for Christmas. And she had never seen a clue about what I was doing. She knew that I was going to school for art. And I just remember receiving an album, and at the time I couldn't really figure out my direction because I was going to art school, didn't necessarily have too many images of stuff, just history. So my references, be it like somebody with the narrative, be it weird. And so I was working in such a way, number studied when I was in school, I studied sculpture as opposed to painting, but I had somewhat of like a mixture with my degree. Between Two Worlds references between several different things, between things that are tangible and things that are not tangible, things about the past, things about the present, things that like that's tangible, but at the same time, in a more abstract way. And it has a lot to do with just crossing the line. And then I jarred when closer up in there's like from a tree, it had a lot to do with this. Great uncle told me about the tree, and about rings and trees, and talking about the age. With the photographs, I have a family member, very like regal photographs. So a lot of those photographs were taken on my grandmother's side and my side. My father's side were a part of the Underground Railroad and migrating to New Jersey. And so that's a reference between well, and also there's another side. And so it's a cross between that and rap with grandma.
So Radcliffe, I heard you. Could you hear him, Lava? Because I guess some of the audience members are saying you're a little broken up, Radcliffe. Your audio is kind of coming in and out.
He was a little broken up.
I'll come a little closer.
Okay, I just want people to be able to hear you.
Is it much better? Hello?
Now I can't hear you at all.
Not at all.
I don't know what happened.
Sorry. What am I hitting? Hold on. Let me get a little technical help real quick. But I'm gonna talk a little bit here.
The wonders of technology.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
I can hear you.
I'll get a little closer. Okay, so where is it that I should start? Just talking a little bit about it again real quick. Where should I start?
Okay. I think just like a short recap. I heard most of it, so I don't know where people kind of cut in and out. But I know that you said you had your grandmother had given you some 400 photographs, and you were using them during art school.
And then it was like the perfect influence for me at a time when I'm graduating from art school. She kind of led me into making this kind of work where I was using photographs. And one side of me was doing stuff that was dealing with the narrative of people like a Jacob Lawrence. But then it was all wrapped together like a quilt for me, because there were references as well. And my grandfather was somewhat color, so there's parts of things that show the retreat that my great uncle told me about. So it's a mixture of stuff. But then at the same time, family members that were part of the Underground Railroad and have family members Harveyites, and mixture between crossing the Atlantic and things that are tangible and things that are not tangible. And you look at it today, my work seems like it has a lot to do with, like, take for instance, we live in very strange times and things seem to be very real, but surreal is pretty real to Black people about time. So yeah, that's
okay. We're going to talk a little bit about the next work, By the River. So this piece, for me, you know, I have a history background. So when I see images like this, you know, I automatically kind of think about what that river might have symbolized back in the day. You know, I think of people running through the river to get across to go somewhere. Were they escaping? Or, you know, the Black bodies that were thrown in there after they were lynched. And that's kind of where my brain goes. But if you could speak a little bit about this piece and about the inspiration behind it, I'm sure everyone would be intrigued.
Okay. So yeah, this is another photograph that was given to me by another family member, which was my great aunt on my father's side. And the photographs that I had, she had an album of photographs that were different. These were like taken from a young girl as a girl taking pictures. And she was traveling around the country, and when she was on the train, whenever she would cross a body of water, she would take a snippet out of it. And there were texts written under, but said Mississippi. So I made reference to traveling south, but at the same time, I'm making some references, be it architecture, presentations that are that developed and created these structures and design structures. So there's a reference to that, to people like Simmons, Charleston, who made a lot of metal work to like deal with film Eurobities, references to color. You know, the same thing was wrapped into a quilt. And a mixture of stuff like that, symbols which making reference. And this, you know, this could be the Niger, it could be any, it could, you know, and so it's that Mississippi has a story too that relates to us.
You know, what strikes me about both of your works is that, you know, you can see the pain and the trauma that Black people went through and Black people are going through. But beyond that, you can also see the hope, you can see the healing. And, you know, that to me is so powerful and so moving, and, you know, has continued through your work. And let's talk a little bit about some of the new things that you guys are doing. So Lava, this picture here of Addie J. Hamiter is, I feel like it captures that moment in time when she was, you know, arrested, and that mugshot. And I mean, I know you worked from the mugshot, but I feel like the intensity and the, you know, anguish is coming through her face.
For her.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about this series and
Sure.
what inspired you to kind of create it?
Sure. This particular portrait, Addie J. Hamiter, is part of a larger series of women who were arrested during the Montgomery bus boycott for breaking Alabama's anti-boycott laws. And this was 2 months after Rosa Parks was arrested for not giving up her seat to a white passenger on a Montgomery bus. And again, I was looking at the sort of foundational pivotal event of the civil rights movement. And this was, I worked on this series for about 2 years, and we were coming up on the 50th anniversary of Martin Luther King's assassination in April 1968. And when we think about the civil rights movement, actually, it's still a very male-centered history. And I wanted to bring forward actually the women who initiated the Montgomery bus boycott. There is a quote that I'd like to read by Angela Davis that she, during an interview with Nikki Giovanni this past May. People assumed that the Montgomery bus boycott was the product of the imagination of Dr. Martin Luther King. And of course, Dr. King emerged as a public figure during the Montgomery bus boycott, but it was Black women who organized that boycott. It was Black women who participated. It was not only Black women, but it was poor Black women. It was Black women who were domestic workers, who were maids, who were cooks, who were washerwomen. And those women I would like to lift up now. I would like us to be able to imagine how it is that we are here today as a direct consequence of the collective imagination of poor Black women who walked. I mean, that's a powerful statement, right? And
Yeah.
we are here today in this moment, doing whatever it is that we do as a consequence of the protest and the strategic imagination of the women who initiated the Montgomery bus boycott. Joanne Robinson, who was an English professor at Alabama State College, who was president of the Women's Political Council. The boycott had been in the planning stages for years before the confluence of events came together to allow it to actually happen. So in this series, Addie J. Hamiter, she's a child. She's only 12 or 13 years old. It was a multi-generational movement of thousands of people, actually. And the range of emotion in this in this series of portraits is really striking. she looks ashamed and sad, but there are other women who look defiant. There are other women who are giving the cameraman, the side eye. There's such a varied response to having your photograph taken when you're arrested that comes through in this series of portraits that is really remarkable. And another thing to add is that these are life-size, because I wanted the viewer to have a one-to-one relationship with them, a one-to-one engagement with them. And many of them are looking directly at the camera so that it's as if they are looking at you. They're also, you can't see in this image, they're drawn in such a way that you can see each individual stroke. So this idea of sustained labor is actually embedded in the in each of the drawings.
It's amazing. I actually worked at Alabama State University, which was Alabama State College, before I got my job at the Montgomery Museum of Fine Arts. And of course, so I've learned about Joanne Robinson and the Women's Political Council and all of that. And I've seen the mugshots and the documents and things that, go along with it. But I don't think I've ever seen something that quite is as striking as these works that you're producing right now. I feel like I could reach out and touch Addie, that I could have a conversation with her, that, she's real. And I think that really adds a new dimension to this movement, because it's not over. It's not history.
It's not over. History the past is very present.
That's right. That's right.
Yes.
And so the next work, Freedom Song number 5, We Shall Not Be Moved. What I love about this is, it kind of reminds me, have you seen the musical Hamilton? Okay. The song?
Several times, actually.
Me too. It reminds me of the song where they're saying history will have its eyes on you. And that's kind of how this piece struck me. Like, people are looking at you behind us and in front of us. They're going to judge us by our actions we take now and by our inactions.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
That's exactly the idea that I wanted to convey in this piece. And of course, We Shall Not Be Moved, Freedom Song number 5, it's based on a gospel song. This was one of the freedom songs during the civil rights movement, which essentially speaks to an unyielding commitment to freedom, an unyielding commitment to equality, an unyielding commitment to political access and economic parity. So the eyes on these tambourines are drawn from photographs of my Southern ancestors, all women. And so this idea of being watched, and not so much being judged, but I just think about how my grandmother would watch me, and there was a look that she gave me when I was misbehaving growing up that would just have me, straighten up immediately. So there's this idea of all of the sacrifices, the lives that were lost in the past, and all of the organizing, all of the work, all of the labor, and what are we doing today? How are we fulfilling that dream? And what are we doing today to extend this struggle and dream for equality? And it's just so interesting to me how these works that this was 2019, the other work was 2018, and here we are 2020 in the midst of Black Lives Matter protests globally, global protests against racial injustice, against the continued and seemingly perpetual violence against Black lives.
Yes, this piece is just so powerful. And, you know, what I love about it is that it reminds us that, you know, our silence is a stance, our inaction is a stance. There's always somebody watching us and, you know, telling us, what are you doing?
That's right. That giving us that eye.
That's
giving
right.
us that eye, that look. Yeah. Yeah.
So Radcliffe, we're going to switch over to you now and talk a little bit about some of your newer work. This particular piece, Door of No Return, I think is really interesting because it literally like is a window into something. And I feel like it could be a window into something for a lot of different people for a lot of different reasons. What was your interpretation and take upon making this?
Well, this is a larger version of a smaller that I made back in 2005. And basically around the time I did my DNA because I was curious. You know, I'm curious about art history, curious about lots of things, but I really need to know my own history. And so I trace this stuff there and amongst the Mende and the Baga. And so I make a trip to Senegal and I get to the closest slave castle and I went to Goree Island. I went to Goree Island with the idea of collaborating with a group of musicians and a choreographer. And we went on that trip and we did that. And then when I came back, I started making this work. But I look at the piece Through the Door of No Return, which was like, you know, which was where we were last touched continent. And so it basically, when you look at it too, you see this kind of glittery black sand background that's meant to reflect, like, almost like symbolize outer space as well. This piece, I filmed myself in a fishing boat driving to the island and driving away from the and so yeah, this piece was yeah, that's what.
I think that this piece is so interesting because, you know, it allows the viewer to think about, you know, what does that little window into the ocean mean to them? You know, you talked about how you made this piece after finding out what your ancestry was. And, you know, for me, a person that has not done that and doesn't know where, you know, I come from, I look at a piece like this and I think the multitude of possibilities of where that could lead me and where that could take me. So I think this piece is very personal to everyone who views it in a variety of ways. And so the next piece we're going to talk about is Vessel. And so I love this piece because it has so many varied elements. And, you know, it's so interesting the way you've kind of juxtaposed and put things together. And first of all, talk a little bit about what the white on the floor is and in the barrels.
The white is crushed glass, making somewhat of a reference to sand, pink lakes. So there's a reference to salt water, a reference to things that have shine a lot at one time.
Shine.
Things that had like, just like that screen with the glittery screen, and some do things that will repel. Things that will repel certain beliefs. And so the baskets that hold the glass tarp. And the tarp on top reference to shipping. Also, there's a reference to what you can't see is stitching on top of the tarp, and the stitching is a stitch of the Mason-Dixon, and that's about where it's like making that family and the migration to south to the north. But also there's another reference on top of relations dealing with space and outer space. I'm a big fan of one of my favorite musicians is Sun, and there was always this song that deals with outer spaceways. And there was a singer in Sunrise group named June Tyson, and she would always say, "Fine Earth boring, just the same old thing. Sign up for Outer Spaceways Incorporated." And that, for me, it was about thinking about other worlds outside of here. I feel like we catch so much hell in this world we live in. Real fascinated what's beyond, what's up in the stars, just like we were talking about Sam Cooke. And so it's a lot of those references. So that shipping tarp, it's there. The boat itself has has a lot to do with the journeys that have been made here, but then also brain about the recovery of our own journeys to go back into another place that's not necessarily tangible. So on top of the boat itself, there's a small African sculpture that's in Congo, and the mix between all those different thoughts.
So there's so much to this piece that we had a conversation on the phone yesterday, Radcliffe, about this piece, and I found myself thinking about the conversation afterwards, like, oh, I wonder what this means, and I wonder what that means. There's so many layers to this one piece. And, what I think is great about your work is that it is so multi-layered. There are so many different things within it that, we all can get something different from it. And I know one of the things that you told me yesterday was that, you like to make work that's personal so that it can be universal.
Yeah.
And I honestly think that, you have just achieved that because, I look at your work and the same thing goes for you, Lava. I look at both of your guys' work and I can see elements of myself in it. I can see elements of my ancestors or my future generations and what they can learn from it. And I just applaud both of you for the tremendous work that you're putting out and the messages that you're telling us and giving us. And, I'm so grateful that you both could be here today. So I think now we could probably open it up for a little Q&A session. So we have a few questions that have come in during this talk. The first one, Lava, is to you. Let me see what it said. Okay, it says, how did Lava come to use tambourines in her work?
So I have been using tambourines in my work since 2013. But I played the tambourine in my grandmother's church growing up. And so it's, and I always wanted to use some artifacts from my childhood. And for me, the tambourine it's a multi-layered instrument in terms of meaning. It is an egalitarian instrument. Anyone can play it. It doesn't require special training. For me, it will always speak to a kind of ecstatic experience, playing it as a girl and singing in the choir, that kind of thing. But it's also an instrument that has, it's an instrument whose history is rooted in cultures around the globe. So it really speaks to our common humanity. And since it doesn't require special training, it's one of the first instruments that children play, like you'll see small toy instruments. It is very accessible. So it really does speak to a shared experience in a way that other instruments can't. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to use it, but also because it is specific to my childhood experience and gospel music. Yeah.
You know, I think that, you know, a lot of people kind of have that reminiscing in their childhoods. I know a lot of young parents, when they go and get a lot of stuff from like their baby showers, there's always that one gift somebody gives them where it's like something that the kid can just kind of whack.
Right.
And so, you know, I think that everyone kind of can relate to that, at least, if nothing else, in the work, which I think is great. Because it draws people in, you know, it allows people that entry point into your work. And you know what I find fascinating about both of your work is you're both dealing with very complex issues. And you're both dealing with traumatic issues, but you both do it in a way that is inviting, that allows people to come at it from whatever standpoint they are in their life, which I think is great, because then it allows for a conversation to happen. It allows for a dialogue to happen, which I think is necessary. And so one of the next questions we got is, when we make art of protest, how can we leverage those images into real action on the parts of the viewer? To either one of you or both.
I'll let Radcliffe jump in on that one.
Take it. You got it?
I'm leaving this one to you, Radcliffe.
Fair. You know what? When it comes to protest and when it comes to actions and thinking about my own personal work, it's like whenever I have my work itself, it's about, it is about protest, but it isn't. It's about celebrating who I am, for one thing. And there's a lot of issues of pain that are there. But, you know, when I come to my studio, I talk about sometimes, studios like this church where I go to solve problems,
right,
ask and work on it. And I believe in operating in a different way. I think that there are ways that I could deal with protest. Daughter was out there protesting. It's like, I might not necessarily go out there, but I'm very supportive of those people. And I just think it's, you know, the only reason right it's complicated with all the stuff that's happened with the viruses. But I think that, you know, what happened, like with this moment of the world where we are right now, it's like a pause button. And that pause button has put me in space to reflect. You know, I wake up bombarded by the news and bombarded by what's going on. Painful, and I'm trying to figure out ways to deal with that. And, you know, especially at this moment too, like I know that we get in situations where we deal with public art. And I know that there are monuments, and I know that new monuments and new ways of thinking need to go into place.
Right.
It's difficult for people to accept that. And we are operating in those spaces where we are the ones that are making those statements today. No matter if it's like the person who's making posters, no matter if it's people who are being supportive and giving advice to. And and it's very times. And I'm trying to think about the last time that this kind of situation it reminds me of, because I'm still young. But, you know, our experiences may have been like Rodney King. And at the moment, you know, felt like I remember seeing images and things happening, but I also remember seeing it happen here in Atlanta, or, you know, watching things in LA and different parts of the country. But it's a beautiful thing to be able to understand that people around the world are taking notice as well. I think a lot of the fact that the world has been pushed to push a pause button.
Yeah, I think that's an important idea that, you know, no matter what role you're playing, whether you're the artist or you're the viewer,
Right.
that, you know, it's all our responsibility how we're in this together and how we move forward. Okay, another question's come in. It says, it's sort of along the same lines. It says, how can art play a pivotal role in healing during such police brutality and unrest?
Hmm. I guess I'll jump in on this one.
I'll share it with you too.
Sure. The process of creating, the process of creativity, expressing creativity, is our birthright as human beings. You know, some of us are designated as artists because we chose that as our vocation, and perhaps we have some training for it. But the act of creativity is healing for everyone. So I'm not addressing, you know, art with a capital A that's in a museum that you go see. What I'm advocating for instead is that everybody make art and heal yourself. That's how we heal. It's our birthright. You don't have to go to a museum to see artwork in order to feel something from it. You can create in your own living room, in your own kitchen, in a myriad of ways. It doesn't have to be painting or drawing. You can knit, you can cook, but any act of creativity, any art form is healing. And I think that if we all, especially at this moment where for many of us, there's still a shelter in place, we're all on pause, really dig deep into our own creativity and heal ourselves, because we need it in this moment, especially when, as Radcliffe mentioned, when you look at the news, with social media and images of violence against Black bodies over and over and over and over and over, it's like reliving this kind of trauma, and we need to take a break. Gardening, heal yourself through gardening. So that's my my statement about art. Being creative is an art form, no matter what form it takes, making music, and it is healing and available to all of us. You don't have to be an artist to do it.
Yeah, I remember, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
My experiences, you know, growing up in Atlanta, I've had run-ins with the police. I've been shot before, and
Wow.
I remember it happened when I was in college, and I just remember, and I remember at the time the kind of work that I was making, which was dealing with the past, dealing with past trauma, and I realized, like, it's just for me personally. My job is to make something that has somewhat spiritual reference. Just because I think that most do is love, right? And number one, love yourself. And so I had to kind of divorce myself from that work, right? Or do it and to deal with beauty, and beauty
Right.
over the pain. It's just like sometimes you can hear something or hear a song and so true, but it's not something you could live with every day.
Right.
Hurts.
Right.
And you cry. And I need that sometimes. But for me personally, I think that I could not really exist with so much rage. I have a lot of rage in me. I have a lot of feelings. You know, it's like I literally, just like I said, I feel the way where I got to go in the studio and work it out with myself. And I'm fortunate and lucky to have it. And I think it was God's. I don't think it was I picked up in art school. It's something to be guided way. And yeah, And it's, you know, it's interesting watching these times and feeling like, what can I do? What can I do? And then, you know, one part of it is like, I not want to sacrifice my art a certain way either. It's not necessarily me, but other people are very gifted in that. But for me personally, because we're all very different, I could not work in that space because I do not want to go back to things that taken me a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
I think
You know, I think what you're both kind of getting at is the idea of self-care. You know, I
Yeah.
think that's really important right now for all of us, no matter what profession you're in, vocation you have, you know, where you're at in your life. Self-care is extremely important. And, you know, it's like that old saying, music soothes the soul. Well, you know, I'll take that further. I'll say art soothes the soul, and whatever creativity soothes the soul, you know, whatever form, like Lava was saying, you find yourself doing it in, I think helps us all kind of deal with these traumas that we see on a daily, sometimes multiple times a day, in the news or in the paper or on social media. And I think we all just need to take a step back and really understand that it's okay to take that breath, that it's okay to focus on ourselves and make sure that we're okay and that we are healing, because we can't help others if we're damaged ourselves.
Right.
But, you know, I think that's a good message. One of the things that we talked about earlier that someone was curious about is we talked about hope and how that comes through in your work. Someone is curious as to, how do you guys feel right now? Do you feel hopeful?
I feel hopeful, but not optimistic. I guess that's the best way to describe how I feel, because, well, you're a historian, so you know this. Each time this country has made some progress in terms of equality or racial equality or access to resources or some way that, well, let me just back up. Each time there's progress, afterwards there's backlash. And we saw that during Reconstruction, and then Jim Crow afterwards. We had, for the first time in the United States history, a Black president, and who followed it? One of the most hateful, one of the most hateful presidents, who has sown seeds of racial hatred in this country. I mean, in ways that I don't think I've really seen in my lifetime. But what I do see, what I'm hopeful about, is that these protests were global. You know, I think this is the first time that I've seen so many like non-Black and brown people join with Black and brown people to protest against violence against Black and brown bodies. So, and you have major companies, you have institutions. I mean, I don't know about you, but I've been getting all these emails in solidarity, what can I do? And a lot of self-reflection and soul searching by different organizations and institutions. So I don't know how long this moment of reckoning will last. And I don't know what permanent changes it will make. But at this moment, I do feel hopeful that there are changes in the works.
I'll be short about what I have to say. I think, you know, it's basically going bad to get better. And, and you know, just hopefully, me, it comes to certain generations have to step in. And I am so proud of younger generations that are actually a part of something in such a way that I don't think that I was actually myself.
Yeah.
You know, weren't as big, weren't as global. And but this is a problem. And I'm so glad, you know, I see these statues come down, and yes, I can't wait to see them come down. You know, I'd like to see them somewhere with all the damages that they have. I think in our images of Leopold being torn down in the junkyard, and I see that, and I think those deserve to be in places like that.
Yeah.
And but they could be in a museum. I don't think that it is about like erasing everything, because I think, you know, if you don't, will repeat. And I think that there should be a certain put out in such a way where people could put it in context and understand what it was, and that would be awesome. But I am very optimistic and excited, and I think that this is probably the best time for me to be at work. I've been getting so much work done, which feels good, and it makes my soul feel because I had the other parts of the world and go into my space.
Yeah, you know, I think, like Lava said, as a historian, you know, it's you take 2 steps forward and you take 6 steps back.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think that truly the way for us to reconcile that is to just continue to push and continue to do what we do and continue to, you know, make art, because art is our record, you know?
Yeah.
It's how future generations are going to know what we did. And I feel strongly that both of your work reflects that record in such a tremendous way. And I just feel so honored to have you both here tonight. And I just want to thank you both for being here and talking with us and going over, you know, what this exhibition means, but also what your work means. And so just thank you to both of you.
Oh, thank you. It was a pleasure.
So our time is up with Lava Thomas and Radcliffe Bailey. It went by so quickly, but I hope that you all enjoyed it, and I hope that we were able to bring you some insight or some thought-provoking things, and that you'll check them both out and whenever we get back to whatever our new normal is, and see their work in real life. So thank you all for joining us, and have a great night.
Dude.